What's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners, and we've got a killer show for you here today because we are going to dive deep on a couple of players that you should be taking a look at the end of your drafts. Because let's face it, you could absolutely kill the beginning of your drafts and have your team set up for success, but it's those diamonds in the rough that you find maybe towards the middle or end of your draft that really set your team apart from the other teams in your league. Those are the picks that you really absolutely have to nail. It gives you a little bit more upside than what other owners have on their teams. And I've got a couple of late round wide receiver sleepers that you need to be keeping an eye on in the 2020 drafts because they could offer you a whole lot of upside at a discounted price. I've got two different ones, a guy that's going to be more of a deep threat, and then I've got one of those slot guys that I always love to add to my team, former teammates, and the first one is going to be the one that's still in Detroit, and that's Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones is severely underrated every single season. Right now, he's got an ADP of 115, making him the wide receiver 43 off the board. Now, last year's numbers don't really jump off the board to you right now. Yes, he had 9 touchdowns, fourth most in the league, tied for fourth most in the league. 4 of those came in one game, however. But let's take a look at some stats outside of just those top layer numbers that people look at sometimes. If you take a look at week 1 through 9, which was prior to Matthew Stafford's injury, he was the wide receiver 21 on a point per game basis. And the reason I look at a point per game basis is because Detroit did have their bye prior to Stafford being injured. So that kind of skewed the numbers a little bit. But if you look at points per game, he's the wide receiver 21 in half PPR formats. That was a huge value to owners last season. Another number that I want to take a look at as well, if you don't have a chance to see Marvin Jones in person or on TV, I don't think you get to really see how great of an athlete he is. Last year, 2.1 average yards of separation. That was the third fewest in the NFL. Marvin Jones is a guy that can go and get those contested balls. He has made some highlight reel catches. And right now he's getting overshadowed by Kenny Golladay because Kenny Golladay is the wide receiver 1 there. It's not Marvin Jones. I'm not trying to tell you that. But I am trying to tell you that with Matthew Stafford back and healthy, we could be looking at a re-energized Marvin Jones that would have been a great fantasy asset last year if it hadn't been for the Stafford injury. So again, those 2.1 average yards of separation, Marvin Jones is the guy that's going to go get it. Now, since he's joined the Lions in 2016, I don't think a lot of people realize this. He has 27 receiving touchdowns. That is tied for 6th most in the NFL during that time span. And not only that, he averages 9.14 yards per target. That is the 14th highest in the NFL with at least 200 targets. So he is a guy that is going down the field and not only seeing a lot of his fantasy value from those big plays, but he's a guy you can trust to make those big plays because if you get him, especially in some one-on-one coverage down the field, he's going to win those balls down the field a majority of the time. He's dealt with injuries. In 2019 and 2018, he was not fully healthy. His one fully healthy season in Detroit, he had his first year there. It was a little bit of a down year. It took him and Stafford a year to get going. But then he had a big year, 61 receptions, 1,101 yards, 9 touchdowns. His 18 yards per reception led the league that year, a big-time playmaker. Let's not forget, they've added DeAndre Swift in the run game through the draft. That right there on its own could really make teams commit to have to defend the run a whole lot more than what they have had to done in the past with Detroit. But TJ Hawkinson as well. TJ Hawkinson comes back and he is healthy. He is a guy that could command the middle of the field. That area where Marvin Jones isn't going to work. Him and DeAndre Swift, both of them being those type of receptions. You throw in Danny Amendola in the slot. Those are 3 weapons that defenses are going to have to really try to pay attention to, which means a lot of one-on-one coverage on the outside, allowing Marvin Jones to potentially slip past those defenders. ADP of 115, wide receiver 43. You could get him in that area, and you could end up having a low-end wide receiver 2 on most weeks. That's how good he can end up being in 2019. Now, before we move on to my next sleeper, just want to remind you the 2020 Fantasy Headliners Draft Guide is available for pre-order for $19.99 right now. This thing's going to be about 600 pages worth of straight fantasy football fire, and it's also got some exclusive sections in it that you are not going to find anywhere else. I guarantee you that you are not going to find a better product for the price with more information. Not only that, but if anything happens and for some reason the season is canceled, we're still going to give you the 2020 draft guide, and we're going to give you a 2021 draft guide as well. So if the season's canceled, you're going to get a 2-for-1 deal. So you've got the 2020 draft guide to read up on, and then you've got 2021 to help you prepare for those drafts. But that's not going to happen, people, because we're going to have a season this year. So make sure you head to thefantasyheadliners.com and pre-order yours now. Now, my second late round wide receiver sleeper is Golden Tate. He's getting lost in the shuffle a little bit right now in New York. He's going even later than what his former teammate Marvin Jones is going. Right now, he's got an ADP of 155. He's the wide receiver 55 off of the board. Now, again, I mentioned it with Marvin Jones. Sometimes fantasy owners tend to only look at those top layer statistics, and that's why we are here, to help you find those numbers down below that may paint a different picture and allow you to find guys like this. Because a lot of you might forget that Golden Tate was suspended for the first 4 games of 2019. He was taking some medication. It was for him and his wife, who were having some fertility issues, I believe, and he ended up being suspended for the first 4 games of 2019 because of that. When he came back, however, he was the wide receiver 28 in half PPR format. So week 5 through week 17 in half PPR formats, he ended the season as the wide receiver 28 during that stretch. And overall numbers, I don't even need to break it down to points per game to give you that number. So he was a guy, again, high-end wide receiver 3 that you're going to be getting at a discounted price. One thing I love to have on my team, and I'm going to mention more of these guys over the offseason, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and you stick around if you are new to the Fantasy Headliners, because we're going to have a lot of this for you. I love slot monsters. That's what I call them, slot monsters. There's going to be a hashtag that we're going to come up with there, people. I love guys who work out of the slot in half PPR or PPR formats, because those are guys that are going to get peppered with targets and can do a lot of damage over the middle of the field. Last season, 85.6% of Golden Tate snaps were in the slot. That was 6th highest in the NFL. He also had 67 targets, 14th highest in the NFL, and 5 touchdowns, tied for 2nd most in the NFL. And again, those are numbers out of the slot. Okay, so 5 touchdowns out of the slot, 67 targets out of the slot. Not to mention, again, one more time, okay, he was suspended for the first 4 games of the season. If he had those extra 4 games, those numbers probably are a lot higher. His 6.1 yards after the catch per reception ended up being the 12th highest in the league. So not only is he a guy that's going to get peppered over the middle of the field with like a good amount of targets, but he's a guy that can do a lot with the ball after he catches it. But he's not just a one-trick pony either. He can go down the field. He can break off some of those plays. 4 touchdowns of 20-plus yards last year was tied for 3rd most in the NFL. So he's a guy, again, he's going to work over the middle of the field, but he's going to break off those big plays. He's not going to be a guy that's just going to catch it and go down. He's making plays after he catches the football, and I love that. I love that in fantasy football. I can't tell you how much I love those guys that are going to get you those second chance yards, that are going to do those things with the ball in their hands. That's what I try to look at with these guys. What do they do after they get the ball in their hands? And Golden Tate is a guy that can do a lot. This offense is a perfect fit for him. If you're a member of Headliner Nation and you've been around since last season, you heard me talk about this team a little bit more in depth when I found Darius Slayton. And Darius Slayton is a guy over the summer, I think it was in July, when I gave you Darius Slayton as a potential breakout dark horse guy for you to keep an eye on. And he ended up doing just that at one point. This offense is set up perfectly because you've got Evan Ingram who can stretch the field, and you've got Darius Slayton now who can really stretch the field. He's the deep guy on this team. Both of those guys can help stretch the field, and you have to pay attention to Saquon Barkley, one of the biggest threats out of the backfield in the NFL. So now you've got guys 20 yards down the field you got to pay attention to. You got a guy in the backfield you got to pay attention to. Golden Tate can just run around, find some open space there in the middle of the field, maybe creep behind those middle linebackers, those linebackers a little bit, or just get in front of them. And now you've got a guy that Daniel Jones just got to toss an easy pass to, and boom, he is gone. Please make sure that you are paying attention to Golden Tate in half PPR and PPR formats 100% for sure, because he's a guy that could rack up a lot of those points really quick for you, because he's going to get a decent amount of targets this season, especially if Daniel Jones can take another step forward. But it sounds like what the Giants' game plan this year is, they're going to want to run the football a lot, and when you do that, that's going to allow for some big plays from the wide receivers. And Golden Tate, again, going to get those targets in the middle of the field and can break off some of those bigger plays. Headliner Nation, do me a favor. Number one, hit that like button for me and subscribe to the channel. If you're not a part of Headliner Nation yet, hit that subscribe button and join Headliner Nation today. Like the video and comment below. Tell me below in the comments, what is one sleeper that you have found in the past that has helped you win a fantasy football championship? Headliner Nation, thanks so much for tuning into this video. Don't forget, head to thefantasyheadliners.com, pre-order your draft guide today, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Have a good one.